guys, this is Malorian, and this is another Warmachine 101. Again, I do these every single weekend. I'm up here on the Mr. Malorian Facebook page, and on Fridays I just ask you what you want me to answer, and then I answer them. So here today I have 6 different responses I'll be going after, and let's go at it. So the very first one here comes from Thomas Broyd and says, back to list building for newbies. In a tournament perspective, does it make sense to build a list specifically as a Hordes drop, Pendrake and similar, and one as a Warmachine drop, Epic Iris, Stormcallers? If so, is there a common denominator that Horde lists suffer more from, say like dude spam, defense skews, etc.? Now, there are many ways you can be building your tournament pairing. You could be building one all-comers list and then something that kind of just answers all the different gaps in that all-comers. You could be building a skew and then something that goes the other way with the skew. Or, like this thing here, you can go Warmachine and Hordes. That is something that a lot of people do and have found some pretty good success on. Now, I know you asked more about the Horde side, but I want to start here more with the Warmachine side because it's a little bit more clear. In general, and I'm going to be very clear with that because there are a lot of ways to build lists. You could be making Warmachine lists that are heavy in this and heavy in that and mix of this, but in general, in Warmachine, you'll have one jack. That one jack might be a Colossal, might be a heavy, blah blah blah, but there's generally just that one jack, and then all the rest is infantry and support pieces. So keeping that in mind, you really need to really focus on that anti-infantry. A big part of this is cricks. They might just have an arc node. The jack might not even matter. So make sure you have a lot of anti-infantry, and then something else that can deal with a jack. Be it a Stormcaller that you can just be like, oh, you're disrupted, or Epic Iris that can run up and say no focus. Those things are very easy, very straightforward. And then of course, once you take the focus away from a jack, they're useless. You can pretty much get in there and do whatever you want. Keep in mind, I said in general, there are other builds. There is the whole Virus 2 Griffin spam. There's my Buccaneers. We might have to deal with double Colossal. So there could be other issues there. But in general, like I'm saying, like 90% of the time, if you're up against Warmachine, there'll be one jack and just a bunch of infantry. So that side of the list building is pretty easy. It's basically saying not so much even anti-Warmachine. This is my anti-infantry list. Now, when we get to the Horde side is a lot more different. For starters, there's not generally one heavy. Again, there's lots of ways that you could be making the list, but in general, there's multiple heavies. There could be some lights thrown in there as well, and maybe even now so, Gargantuans becoming a lot more prevalent. There might be no infantry, there might be just a unit or two or something, but whereas in Warmachine, where the infantry is playing a much bigger part, over here in Hordes, it's a lot more about the beast. And again, that's because of the way that the two systems work. Warlocks need to have these beasts to generate fury to keep them going. And also, beasts are a lot more of just saying like, oh, sorry, you tried to disrupt me? I don't care. I'm just going to come up here and keep buying attacks, right? Unless there's some other crazy thing going on, there's not a lot of things that shut down beasts like you're able to shut down a jack. Once upon a time, you had Gorman that could just like blind 3 beasts at once, and that'd be a big deal, but now they just shake it and bad things happen. So with that in mind, if you're trying to build a list to deal with Hordes, it can be a real problem. First of all, assassination gets a lot harder because you have transfers. If you're building a assassination list as the way you're trying to win, you have to make sure that you have just that many more attacks so that you can burn through all those transfers and then get to kill. Unless you have like grievous wounds or something like that. So that can be tough. Now, if you want a list that's going to go for more attrition, you have to really deal with those beasts. So you need something that hits really hard, plus some of these beasts, particularly in Circle, can have very high defense. You know, when you're dealing with jacks, they're like, oh, defense 10, defense 11, oh, wow, 12. But over here, when you're dealing with Hordes, it can be a lot higher. And so all of a sudden, you need something that can hit really hard, and then also hit very accurately. Now, there could be different buffs to doing this, different damage buffs, you can try knocking down, blah, 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 but taking out those beasts can be key. And of course, if you ever do that to an opponent where you take out their beasts, they're in a lot of trouble because their warlock is like now slowly dying. They're on the clock while they're cutting themselves for fury, and good times happen. But that's a lot easier said than done. You can build this like it. A good example for that would be someone like Siege, who has rangers to go out there to deal with that whole to hit issue, and he has his feet and the high-powered attacks, and maybe Ian and Holt to be dealing with that whole hard punch issue. And he can do that. He can be like, I pop feet, rangers are up there, boom, 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 you just lost 3 heavies. What now? So some casters can do that, other ones can't. You mentioned here dude spam. Another great thing you can do to try and do against these beasts is that they are very high-cost activations. When you are activating a beast, this is like, wow, this is like 10 points. How many points am I going to get back from this? And if they're just going after cheap infantry, especially if they have tough or something like that, they're not getting that return. And you can get in there, you can jam, go for scenario, but you got to really be ready, because if you can't really have the tools to push that scenario and keep them out of zones, keep them away from flags, they can get in there, and then you're in a lot of trouble. Because if you don't have any way of removing and killing those beasts, yeah, things get really nasty quick. So in general then, when you're starting to look at the hordes, you start realizing that, like, wow, this is not the same thing. In Warmachine, there was like, it was so simple. Just be able to shred infantry and shut down one jack. Easy. In hordes, there could be a whole concoction. Again, in Warmachine, there could be lots as well, but in hordes for sure, there's lots of different mixes you have to deal with. So I think more so, even if you are going to do this and make one less anti-Warmachine, one less anti-hordes, I wouldn't make it anti-hordes in general. I would be trying to key down on some key matchups. Legion with a bunch of beasts, or maybe this build and this build. Really try and focus on some really set lists that you expect to see, and try and deal with those, because since there's so many different mixes of hordes, it can be hard to try and get something that's like, it's just anti-hordes. It just is. There's not really something there like that unless you have grievous wounds or something like that. So there you go. Hopefully that got across. Pretty much I'm saying you can build it being anti-Warmachine and anti-hordes, but hordes can be such a mix of a stew, and it doesn't have the same setup weaknesses that Warmachine does, like disruption, that really a lot of times it's a lot better just to focus on those key matchups. So there you go. There's a long answer to that first one. Hopefully they aren't all like this, or else we'll be here for an hour. But next one here is from Jordan Scott, and he says, how does one become competitive in any respective game? How many games should one play a week, month, to stay at competitive end of things? I ask as I have never been at a competitive level in minis, but I used to run things in card games when I was younger. The first thing to realize about the first part of this thing here, how does one become competitive in any respective game, is realize that games are different. You don't walk into this and be like, I'm just a good gamer, I can play whatever and I'm going to be good to go. Lots of different games, really key in different aspects, and some things just trigger a lot better with some people than for others. A great example is if I look at board games. If we have to deal with a board game that has to do with kind of more planning for the future, that can be one set of game. If there's another game that has to do with a bunch of bluffing, that's a different type of game. Another one that has to do with resource management, that's a different type of game. And different people will be better at different one of those games. And it's the same thing here when you come to minis. Somebody that's really good at Warmachine could be completely different than someone who's really good at 40k. And I don't want to get into Warmachine versus 40k, but just realize that some people just really key into the real mechanics, because that's really what a game is really based on. It's really saying, hey, this is this framework that I'm working with, let's fight. And some people will say like, oh, this is awesome, this mechanic, let's go for it. And another person will say like, oh, I don't really get this mechanic, I'm going to try and force this other one in and not really do as well. So I think that's the first thing to get across, is just to realize that there is no ultimate gamer that's good at everything. If you do want to try and get to that level, it has to be more where you want to be a student of the game. So that gets away from the enjoyment of the game. It's more like, okay, let's take this game and see how it ticks. I'm going to take a game and say, like, Sheriff of Nottingham. This is a board game. Okay, this is really a bluffing game. If I'm trying to figure out how this works, you can really get hit hard if all of a sudden you call some wrong bluffs. You can really get ahead if you call some good bluffs. Wow, it's really not so much about trying to keep track of everybody's resources. It's really about trying to be able to call people out with their bluffs. Okay, there's one thing. Okay, another game over here. Shadows over Camelot, another board game. Wow, looking at the way the game plays, that Grail mission really is almost impossible, and if we lose it, we can actually have a better chance of winning the game. You're almost studying the game to figure out how to break it down. And these type of people, although they might not enjoy the game as much, they will really be able to do this. You can go in, you can study the game, and be a master of it. And when it comes to Warmachine with this, that's almost what you have to do. You have to look at this and say, all right, the game, which is like Witches right now, what are the rules? What mark are we in? What steamroller pack are we in? What is this really going for? Is this really set up for scenario? Is it really set up for assassination? Does it really favor fast armies or resilient armies? And then really being a student of the game for all the different other models. What are all the different options? What are all the different combinations? And especially, I say it again, for Warmachine, you have to be someone who studies, and knowledge is power. You have to be a person, if you want to be highly competitive at the game, that you're going to be dedicating time to learning all the models. Not even just the ones in your own faction, everything, so that you're never surprised. Now, you say after this how many games you should be playing a week or a month. This is another very popular question, and again, I'd say that you should be playing at least one game a week to be staying fresh, but it's more important about the level of that game. If you go in and you play one game against Jimmy Newbie, it's not going to help you. You want to make sure that your games are focused on improving. Find someone who's at your skill level or a little bit higher and be forcing those games to be improving your skill. Is there a caster that you want to have more practice against? Line it up. Call up your buddy and say, bring out Epic Haley, bring out this caster, I need to learn how to beat Doomy 3. And really make sure that you're using those games to back up your knowledge game. Because again, that's what Warmachine is all about. So I believe now we've answered this one here. Next one, Neil Rose, or it should be Rose. What makes for a complementary list pairing? Example, what are often good permutations of control, assassination, scenario, attrition, melee, assassination, ranged assassination? And yeah, this is a huge question for everyone. Just like in the first one here, we're talking about list pairings. There are so many ways to do these list pairings that, I mean, for again, try and see like what's the best. He didn't ask that here, but just realize that there is no best. That it's really more your play style. And again, it says what makes for a complementary list pairing? Well, making sure that they're complementary, making sure that whatever one list can do, the other list isn't focused on as well. It doesn't really help if I go into a game saying, oh, this one's double Stormwall, and this one's double Stormwall. This one's ranged assassination, and this one's ranged assassination. What you have to really say is, okay, list one, what is this list all about? Okay, it's about this. For example, it's about ranged assassination. What does this list not want to see? Anything that shuts down range assassinations. So be it things like Barnabas, be it stuff like Clouds, be it stuff like Father LeConte, all these things. If I run into this, wow, this list will suck. Okay, list 2. Let's make this list 2 so that if I face one of these situations, I can pull this out and this will be the perfect counter. So again, it really depends on a lot of these here, which one you're looking at. Like, we're trying to say, like, okay, ranged assassination. Let's just do one as an example here. What would you want to complement with that? Well, you can't really focus in on here saying, oh, do I want to be going more for melee assassination or control? Because the main thing you're trying to avoid is just that range assassination. Maybe melee assassination will work just fine. I've ran it before where I've gone with Kane 2 and Striker 2. Oh, you got LeConte? Boom! POW 25s, you can't take that, right? So you can make that work. Or Control. Oh, I can't shoot you down? Jam time, let's do this. Haley 2, keep him back. We're just going to keep everything far away. Ding, 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 get some points. Yay, won that game, right? So there's lots of different ways, but I think it just really comes down to being able to study your list and honestly answer what the bad matchups are. And some people just can't do that. They'll look at one list and be like, oh no, this is an awesome list. All I need is one more awesome list. And between these two badasses, they'll just never lose. No, take that first list and honestly answer, what does this suck against? Because every single list in the game is weak to something else. So figure out and be honest and say like, yeah, this list here, although it's really badass, really doesn't want to face this. And then once you have those lists of what you don't want to face, now it's pretty easy now to take that as your guidelines for your second list. All right, my second list now just has to be specifically designed to fight these things here. So hopefully that's the answer you're looking for. Now, Neil Rose had another question here saying, oh, and when is a good time to put an Avenger on the table? Let's go find this Avenger. Because I have a painted Avenger, but this poor guy, he sits there up there a lot. So this will be a good time to answer this. I'm going to pull him down. Where are you, buddy? Avenger, you got to be somewhere here. It's been a while. It's been a while. Here we are. If you don't know what an Avenger is, that's this. He's, not normally seen a lot. And that's probably why this question got quite a few likes. And by the way, guys, for you guys doing questions, I love specific things like that. Keep bringing these in. Anyway, when is a good time to bring in an Avenger? Well, let's answer the question. What is the Avenger good for? Well, for one, he actually has a pretty good melee weapon. You know, he's armor 19. I guess I'd be pulling here just to make sure I don't spout out some lies. But if memory is correct, he is armor 19, which is fairly sturdy. That's always something Arcane Shield could be going on as well. And then he also has a POW 18 sword. Now, as far as heavies go, that's pretty good. You know, he's a pretty good beat stick if you really need him. He's only mat 6. I believe, you know, like some of the other Signar Jacks are mat 7, so not really that highest mat, but 6 is still fine, and POW 18 can get the job done. So, if the big thing about Signar is that we have cost 9 Jacks for days. We have so many cost 9 Jacks that this guy is just another one of the options. So again, if you're needing that one hard-hitting Jack, here's your guy. Now, here's some problems with that. He is speed 4 and doesn't have reach. So he's not going to be the fastest to get out there. So if you are looking at a list that needs to go out there and rush out, he's probably not your guy that you're going to be picking. So all of a sudden we're saying like, okay, this is a Jack that can hit hard and is going to be a little bit more defensive, or going to be more of a countermeasure. He's going to sit back, do his thing, walk up with the rest of the force, and then when it starts coming time to peace trade, the speed 4 won't matter because we're all so close together that it really just comes down to when the chaff gets destroyed, that now I just walk up and kill you type thing. So that's good. Now, the other thing that's kind of good to remember too is that with that mat 6, he also has stall. So if he hits a Warjack with this, he'll put stall onto it and make it defense 7, and then all of a sudden then that mat 6 doesn't matter anymore. So in the Warmachine, we can say that's another advantage. He likes seeing Warmachine because in heavy versus heavy, I can hit you once, you're stalled, and now that mat 6 doesn't matter anymore. It's just about not rolling double ones. I'm just going to keep hitting you. So okay, there's another thing that we pulled out. Now let's talk about his number one big thing that pulls him apart from everybody else, and that is his seismic cannon. Now, the seismic cannon is range 10, which is okay, POW 14, which is great for a gun. Can't say anything wrong about POW 14, and then as well is also AoE 4. So we got an okay range gun that has a good AoE, and a really big strength. And so if we're just looking at those pieces, that's also good for anti-infantry, because then even against the infantry, they're still POW 7s. You know, on average, you'll be breaking armor 13 all the time. So he can just lob these shots into infantry and let that AoE 4 land wherever he wants and blow them up. So hooray. Now, the other cool part about that, though, is it also has Quake. So that on a direct hit against an enemy model, so none of this shenanigans about shooting a Risen or something, all models hit, so everyone underneath the AoE 4 are knocked down. And that really is the key part, where knockdown, especially on an AoE, can be huge. Now, you have to ask yourself, why would you be knocking down? And there's probably going to be two main reasons. One, you're going to be knocking down to set up line of sight. If you are trying to kill a Warcaster and he's hiding behind some Sotrati, well, boom, Sotrati all knocked down. Now we can see your Warlock, and they go down. So now, as we start saying those things for that option, we're talking about like a range assassination list. Okay, cool. What's the other way we use knockdown? On the actual caster. If you can ever cast that caster and knock them down, everything's automatically hitting, and you can knock them down. So there's a few other things you could say, like, oh, there's a bunch of champs. Boom, they're all knocked down. Now it's basically like Haley's feet, where they can't really come and get us. Okay, that can be something too, but you can't be having a specialized jack for maybe occasions. You have to be having a specialized jack for a specialized strategy. And so what we're saying right here is that if we're taking this jack, we are going for the ranged assassination. And that this guy is either going to be used to clear the line of sight or knock down the caster. Now, if that's what we're going for, we might need another piece to this. If all we're trying to do is knock down that front range, well, then all of a sudden that range 10 might be okay. And just for something to add in here as well, not having reach helps as well. Because if he was to walk up to try and be in range for his range 10 and then was then engaging something with his reach, he can't shoot anymore. So not having reach is actually a good thing for this. Now, that's all well and good if that's all of his job is, but if he's needing to shoot further and knock down a caster or a warlock, we need to get some more range on this guy, because range 10 and speed 4 just ain't gonna cut it. So what are some ways we can add this? Well, one, we could be putting him on gun mages. If you put this guy on gun mages, he'll have snipe from the UA, and you can boost from the one Jack Marshall boost. So all of a sudden, walk up 4, shoot 14, a threat of 18 inches, you're boosting to hit, what is his rat? His rat is 4, which isn't the best, but if you have a ranger up there, all of a sudden you're looking at rat 6. If you put on the snipe, maybe range 14 will be good enough. Maybe the guy can aim, and then he's basically rat 8. Also when you're boosting this can really work. Now, I also feel that a lot of times when you're trying to do this, knock down the caster portion of this, you're probably not going to be shooting the caster, you're going to be shooting something around it. It's like, okay, you stood too close to that jack. You, Warlock or Defense 16, that jack is only Defense 10 or 12 or whatever. I'm shooting the jack and knocking you down because you're beside it. With that as well, you could say then anything that has movement abilities are good as well, to kind of get things by them. So if you have the gun mages, sure, the gun mages are there to give them snipe and the boost and stuff, but they can also be pushing back models to get closer to that caster or warlock so that this guy, the Avenger, can then be shooting it. Or maybe we're looking at something like, say, someone with Force Hammer to be smashing it back, somebody with TK, then all of a sudden I'm moving up the caster and turning it around, making it a lot easier for a couple of reasons, right? So other casters that might like having this one, maybe with Epic Kane going for the range assassination, maybe going with Siege for the range assassination, Sloan, another good one could be, say, like Cray, That's the thing about Signar. You have lots of guns. There's some casters that are good about shooting, but there's a lot of good shooting stuff in there anyway, right? If you knock a guy down, the Blazers alone could just go in there and you're dead. So anyway, cutting this short then, I guess, or cutting it long, that's really where this Avenger is going to come in. You need to have a list that's based off range assassination, and then once you're going with that, deciding that knockdown is going to be part of your plan. And again, it's not like that's his whole deal. Like the Renegade. For Warmachine, or sorry, for Mercenaries, that's like his whole shtick. He shoots off that one rocket, which literally has one shot, and that's all he has. Then he's just garbage. Well, he's an Arcno too, but whatever. This guy here, at least after he goes up, if it all fails, worst case situation, you have an Armor 19, POW 18 Jack up there ready to do some dirty. So there you go. I guess you could get into some other crazy things, like saying maybe with like Striker 3 and charging, so you get to assault or something like that with this. But either way, it's going to have to be for the range assassination. And again, that was fun. I like stuff like that. It's about really specific models. Next one here. Krista Foley's Murfesto saying, what can Gators do to counter stuff like Butcher 2? Now, I assume when he's talking about Butcher 2, it's probably the Butcher 2 tier is a real issue, where you have all these guys, all these Doomweavers, and they will rip apart your Gators. And it really sucks. The other part that sucks is with Maylock, even though you pop feet and you make them all incorporeal, all of those Doomweavers also have magic swords, so they say, yeah, you're going to run through me? Nope, 3 strike, you're dead. So, in Gators, it's a really bad matchup. It's saying, wow, hopefully you screw up and I can just grind this down, but wow, this is going to suck. And I think this is where it might be a spot where you might be limiting yourself, because you might have also answered this saying, what can Searforge do to answer this? Well, you have to realize in some of these other factions that you do have other options. So again, I'm maybe reading a little bit too much into your question here, but you have to realize that Gators are actually just blind water, and you have other options. And once you start looking at these other options, you start realizing that I have things like Croak Hunters, and Croak Hunters are amazing. You know, not Hunters, Croak Raiders. Croak Raiders will shoot up those Doomweavers. Pew, 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 take him down. What else do you have in there? You have your battle engine. Your battle engine literally can't die to these things. If they come into your battle engine, they just fall down dead. And that thing technically is, even if you're playing like, I only play the alligators, that thing is a pure Gator battle engine. And there is nothing that Butcher 2's Doomweavers can do there. Now, if it is a build that has Ruin or a Conquest, sure, they can get in there and they can try and destroy those battle engines that way. But otherwise, all the Doomweavers can do nothing to that battle engine. You can also use something like maybe some cheap throwaway, what are they called? Bog Trogs. Not the Shamblers. You want the Bog Trogs with reach. And that way, your Croak Raiders can go up and they can shoot. Maybe you have some other shooting from like an Ironback Spitter or something. But after you're all done shooting, you carefully place those Bog Trogs using their reach to tie everything up. Okay, you go, you kill those few Bog Trogs, it's shooting time again. So that's really what you need to do. You can't fight the Butcher 2 tier list in melee. There's just too many Doomweavers. They do it too well. I mean, sure, you might have a few Gators in there to really try and get some killing in there later, but their big weakness is shooting. So make sure that you have lots of that shooting in there, lots of those Croak Raiders, having that battle engine, and being able to kill them that way. And I mean, another nice way to do this is maybe you'd have someone like Barnabas, to say like, Barnabas pops feet, all your Doomweavers are knocked down. Now I know I'm pretty much auto-hitting with all this shooting, and on your turn, you're not even charging. You can walk up, but that's really all you can do. So there you go. Take some Barnabas, take some shooting, kill off some Doomweavers. All right, going into our last question, comes to us from the Mafia boss, Petra Mustafa, and he says, simple question. When you forfeit action or movement, what do you really forfeit? I am perplexed a bit when it comes to a unit forfeiting actions or movements and orders. This is in particular to units hit by the Haley 2 feat. Alright, there's two parts to this. One simple, one a little bit more complicated. the first part is realizing the simple order to the game. You have first your movement, and then you have your action. So unless you have bushwhack or something crazy, first you have to move, and then you get your action. So in a very simple case, like here, if you have to forfeit one of those, be it from Haley 2's feet or from being knocked down or whatever, either you decide that I'm going to forfeit my movement and not move, and then hopefully there's something in range to attack, or I'm going to use my movement to move somewhere, but now I have to forfeit my attack, and I actually can't make any attack once I get there. The second part to this, though, is starting to realize some of the interactions that really require you to have one or the other. So, like, for example, one of the things I normally see, or not normally, sometimes see, is like, oh no, somebody popped Haley's 2 feet on me. Well, what I'm going to do is that since I can't move, I'm just going to forfeit to aim and just do some shooting. You can't do that because you're already having to forfeit your movement for the feet, so you can't also forfeit it to aim. Or, if you're forfeiting your movement to aim, you then can't shoot because you have to forfeit your action. So realize how that works. Another part of this is realizing that you cannot charge when you have to forfeit one of these things. So a unit that is underneath his feet, and maybe this is the whole part here where you're talking about orders, can't order to do a charge because when you're missing one of those, you just can't charge. You'd have to be like, oh, well, I guess you could. You'd be like, I'm going to charge and do nothing, right? You just can't do that. So literally the best they can do is either walk up and do nothing or not move and attack. There is no charging you can be doing there with that. You also can't run. You can't run as well underneath that feat because when you have to forfeit one of those, you can't run. It's just one of those interactions. You can't, and then you can't slam, you can't trample, you can't do any of that stuff. Really, on Haley 2's feet, they are going to walk up. That's it. Unless they're in a spot where they can shoot you and they can't aim, or for some reason they're melee they can punch you, there is very, very little you can do. So, and if you're a beast, you can't force one of those things away, especially if it's Haley's 2 feet. I mean, if it's knockdown, sure, you can force to stand up and then you have to forfeit later. But for Haley's 2 feet, they just can't do anything. And remember, too, for units, as long as I go and I hit one model, the entire unit is affected. So that's a very big thing. So, again, I don't know the specific of what one you're going after, but I'm guessing when you're talking about units and orders, it's that some unit is trying to declare a run or declare a charge, and that just doesn't work. All they can do is advance or stay there and attack. So there you go, guys. It took me half an hour, but I got through these 6 questions. Again, if you want to be in for the next round of these, go to the Mr. Maloran Facebook page, like it, wait for the post on Friday, add your question, and I'll be doing these every single weekend. So there you go. Enjoy your Avengers, and we'll catch you later. Bye.